Hello everyone, and welcome to another video from the team at Dodgy Software. This video will feature physics joints for Newton Game Dynamics and the Irrlicht rendering engine. I'll turn the debugger on so that you can see what's going on. For instance, here you'll notice a capsule bobbing around slightly. You'll notice the little green line in the middle. Now, when the debugger draws green lines, that means that it's a joint. In this case, that joint is an upward constraint, or perhaps not so much an upward constraint, but that's what it's most commonly used for and what it's called in the Newton Game Dynamics library. But basically what it is it's a pin constraint. So it's literally like jabbing a pin through a physics body and holding on top of the pin. So it restricts movement to the axes around the pin. So what you'll note, basically you use those for player objects and things where you're using a collision frame to stop the player from falling over. Now, in this setup I've got the ability to produce a couple of objects. So the first one is a very light, low mass, slow moving cube, and the other one is a high mass. I'm able to delete them by just simply pressing the mouse. So I'll strike this one with first of all, a soft moving object, if I get close enough, and you'll notice it sort of spins and spirals around. Now if I hit it with a fast moving object, you'll see that it sort of ends up darting quite fast across the map and also begins to spin. That is an example of an upward constraint. Now let's move on to the next one. This physics body here is pinned by a corkscrew. Now it's called a corkscrew joint in Newton Game Dynamics because it restricts movement around the pin in the same axes that say that you could move along a corkscrew. So what that means is you can go around the pin and you can also go along the pin. So if I show you that, if I strike this as fairly level as I can, you'll see how it rotates around the pin. Now the debugger isn't quite perfect yet. You'll see how the pin at the moment, at least the visual side of the pin, moves with the body. Still a little more work to do, but still wanted to show off joints today. Now I'll strike it along with a soft moving one there, so I can then show you it moving along that axis. Okay, now I'll move on to the next one, which is my personal favorite. This is the ball and socket joint. So if I strike it with a small object, you'll see you get a very slight amount of movement and the object is capable of pushing back. If I strike it along that axis with a heavier, faster moving object, you'll see it swing. And if I strike it, if I can time it just right, I can now get it to swing around in multiple directions. The reason why it sort of has the pendulum effect is because gravity works really well with the ball and socket joints. However, I haven't found it work quite too well with the next type of joint, which is the hinge joint over here. This one is a hinge joint. I'm not entirely sure why I struggle so much with this one, but I do. I'll show you it in operation. I'll strike it with a small object, and then you'll see that it moves around in the same way that a hinge would. What I've found unusual with the hinge setup is that it seems that the moment you use a hinge joint, gravity stops working. And if you try and set the stiffness of the joint, it also appears that it has no effect. So you'll notice that rather than it nicely falling under the influence of gravity, the physics system will decide, oh well, okay, it's no longer moving, so we'll just freeze it. Still endeavoring to try and find out why that behavior happens, or perhaps if I'm using the joint incorrectly, but that's been my discovery to date. Now let's move on to the next type of joint. This one is called a slider joint. Now a slider will pin an object so that it can't rotate around the pin axis, but it can simply slide along the pin axis. So to demonstrate that, I'll load this body up with a bit of weight, if I can weight it correctly. Let's see. Yep, that'll almost. Let's try again. Okay. So that's now traveling with a cube. So if I strike this with a faster moving, heavier object, as if I can actually strike it. Alright, let's try again. We try and think of it sort of as a train. It's just, okay, there we go. That's perfect, alright. A little tricky to get the setup. And there I go, deleting it again. Okay. There we go. And so you can load up those joints and then cause them to slide along. It's a little tricky to set up, probably owing to the fact that I'm a little uncoordinated, but anyway, you get the idea. Okay, and now on to one of the little more obscure joints, the universal joint. The universal joint allows rotation across 2 axes. So, as you'll notice, rather than the ball and socket where it has a completely fixed rigid axis, this one is sort of somewhat free to wobble a little bit, as you can see there. So this is one that's pinned on 2 axes, I believe. But yeah, so that's a slightly different kind of joint. That covers all of the default joints that are available in Newton Game Dynamics. You can implement your own, of course. There are all sorts of complicated setups, and you need to understand a lot more constraint mathematics on rigid body dynamics and all of that. So I will not be going into that today. But I hope everyone enjoyed this, and until next time, take care.